Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Gail Burke. And we're having as our guest this evening the representative for the City of Beverly to the State House, Jerry Parisella. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, a couple of months ago, December, I guess it was, you and a group of other legislators went to Israel. A little bit of controversy started on that one as to who paid for that.
It was a combination of the Jewish Community Relations Council and myself. So it was split between them and me. No taxpayer money paid for it.
Yeah. And that got to be a little bit testy, I guess, in some quarters, because I guess there's another group that's talking about boycotting Israel. And they seem to be a little upset about that kind of a sponsorship. Did that ever die away? Did anything ever come of that?
Not really. I mean, this trip has been going on for almost 10 years now. Both Governor Baker has gone to Israel. Governor Patrick went to Israel in the past. Mm-hmm. I would say there's probably been about 90 legislators that have been to Israel. That's just from Massachusetts. There are other state legislators from around the country that go. So, you know, I think this is an anti-Israel group that was upset about us going, but I mean, Israel's one of our biggest allies, and it's a huge economic partner too, as well. So I thought it was important.
Yeah, that was the other thing. You sent me a copy of the, I guess, the Boston Review of the economic impact of Israel on the state of Massachusetts, and I was kind of surprised. Like 9,000 jobs are being paid for directly, and then another 27,000 because of the spillover effect that somebody's working here and then they're going to buy and stuff like that. How long has this been going on?
Well, that's what's interesting is that study was from 2015, so I think the numbers are even more so now. Like you said, there were at that time over 9,000 people working for Israeli companies. There's even more now. I think Israelis like the Boston area. Obviously, we've got some of the best educational institutions in the world, Harvard, MIT. Every Israeli has to join the military. It's compulsory service, and they have some of the best cybersecurity military outfits in the world. And a lot of those folks, when they get out of the military, do cybersecurity for the private sector. So a lot of private sector jobs have been developed in cybersecurity. As a matter of fact, we met with a couple of companies that do cybersecurity, and I'm going to go to one of the companies called Cyber Reason. We're going to do a follow-up visit with them because they've got,
in this country or
they're in Boston.
They're in Boston.
Yeah, they're based out of Israel, but they have an office in Boston. They got 200 people working here now. They're looking to hire more. So I think those visits of Massachusetts folks saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you come to Massachusetts and do business here, and here are some of the reasons why," has paid off.
Can you get them to come to Beverly?
It's funny. I mean, North Shore InnoVentures, which is an incubator based at the Cummings Center, does a lot of business development, trying to help companies grow in Massachusetts. So it's something that I would like to try to make a connection with them.
When you're over there, Jerry, did you notice, you had been there before, I take it?
No,
oh, you hadn't?
No.
I wonder, because in the paper, there were a couple of places that you couldn't go for security reasons. Did you notice any kind of hyper security because of the moving the embassy, or the idea of moving the embassy?
I mean, I think Israel is always sort of sensitive, very hyper security. I mean, there's always, you see soldiers everywhere. But we had gotten there 2 days after President Trump made the decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was a very controversial decision. There's no other country that recognizes Jerusalem as the capital because the Palestinians don't like that idea. They feel like that's sort of their holy land as well. So we were going to go to Ramallah in the West Bank, and we were told that it wouldn't be safe to go there. There were a lot of disturbances going on at the time. I was kind of disappointed. I really did want to go there. So we did meet with a lot of Palestinians outside of the West Bank and talk to them to get their perspective. So it wasn't just a Jewish perspective or an Israeli
Right.
perspective. We did get to meet with Palestinians, talk to them, talk to Arabs about who live in Israel, what it's like for them.
Right.
So I thought it was a well-rounded trip that way. You know, we did meet people who, you know, didn't exactly see eye to eye with the Israelis and trying to get their perspective on what life is
Yeah.
like in the Middle East.
Well, I thought it was interesting because other presidents had proposed doing it, but nobody ever did. And then Donald Trump comes along and he actually is going to do it, which I thought was great because I think he's got a good relationship with Netanyahu, which the former president did not have.
When it was funny, yeah, like you mentioned that when I was there, we saw signs for Trump, you know, up in buildings and things like that. And there's some polling that says that Trump is probably more popular in Israel than maybe Netanyahu.
Oh, is that right?
Netanyahu's going through some issues right now with
Yeah.
some scandals and stuff,
Yeah.
and he may actually be indicted soon. He's being investigated for a bunch of things, but yeah, it was definitely a popular decision among many Israelis. But like I said, the Palestinians hate the idea. You know, they feel like there's a lot. I mean, Jerusalem is just an incredible city to visit. It's the most holy city probably in the world. The Jews, the Christians, the Muslims all feel like it's their holy site. So there's so much complexity in that city. And like you said, even Barack Obama, I think during his initial campaign, had said that he would consider having Jerusalem be
Yeah.
the capital, but then because of all the political pressure, decided not to do it. And I don't think there's any, I think maybe Guatemala, since the president has made that decision, has said they will move their embassy, but I don't think any other country. It's just because it's such a hot topic. And
It's
creates a
too
lot of
controversial. Nobody
consternation.
wants to touch it. The hot potato,
Right.
leave it lie someplace else. You said you met with lots of different people besides the Israelis. What's the general opinion you get from all of that?
I mean, what we were trying to find out is like, you know, I mean, obviously the whole issue of peace in the Middle East is a
Yeah.
huge issue, and you know, what can they do to solve the problem? And it's just, I mean, literally goes back, you know, thousands of
Yeah.
years. But just trying to get their perspective. You know, they feel like they're second-class citizens. A lot of the Palestinians in Israel, the Israelis have built a border wall that sort of surrounds the West Bank, so the Palestinians are very upset about that. But also, there's a lot of economic opportunities for Palestinians in Israel that they may not get in places like Syria. You know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, Syria is such.
Did you
awful
get
shape.
to cross the border into Palestinian territory?
That was the problem. Is we did go into parts of the West Bank, but not like Ramallah, which is the capital city,
Yeah.
because of the concerns. We did do a couple of trips with one. There's this group called Roots, which are Palestinians and Israelis trying to work together. We went to a school that has Palestinians and Israelis that go to school together. It's amazing, like the little kids couldn't care less about
Yeah.
the politics.
Yeah.
You know,
That's where it has to start.
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
they're trying to do with the
Yeah.
school. Is
Yeah.
it's called Hand in Hand, and trying to have kids just grow up with each other. Because if they never met each other, they're going to have this sort of feeling of, well, I was told the Israelis
Well,
are
there's
bad, or I was
hatred,
told the
real hatred
Palestinians
there,
are bad.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. But when they go to school together, they're just playing, they're just kids, they're
Yeah.
hanging out. And so I think there was some hope with that going on, but I just don't know. I mean, it's such a complex issue that these groups are trying to do something about it, and hopefully they're successful. But like I said, there's a long history of concern and you know, unfortunately, some hatred
Yeah.
there.
Again, one of the guys I know from the Y, you know, Dan Paska, his take on Israel is that essentially the Palestinians who want to get a good job have to get into Israel
Yeah.
to do it. And the hassle getting through the border, long lines, and it's just because of the security issues of who do you let in and what are they carrying with them kind of thing, has made this very, very contentious, I guess, like you said. And yeah, you feel like a second-class citizen because you're getting patted down every time you go across the border or something.
Yeah, we were literally at the site of where the Palestinians come in through the border checkpoint. So it's almost like a TSA pre-check where they're pre-screened,
Yeah.
go through an extensive background check, and then they're allowed to come in and work in Israel. So if they don't pass that background check, they don't get that work permit to
Yeah.
come in. But
And
I
some
mean,
of them actually live in in Israel.
Oh, yeah.
Don't they have Palestinians as part of their, in parts of their cabinet as well?
There are, I think, like it's a 40-member cabinet called, 40-member parliament, and so they're called the Knesset,
yeah.
and then the Knesset members become sort of their secretaries, their ministers. So like a parliament member will become like a minister of education and so forth. I think there's 6 that are in the Knesset, but a lot of Palestinians don't vote because they don't want to feel like they're legitimizing the government of Israel. So that's an issue there. I think there's 6 Arabs, I should say. So I don't know if they're specifically Palestinians, but a lot of them, like I said, just don't vote because they feel like it's a sort of their protest against the Israeli government, which I don't quite understand. I mean, I think they should coalesce and come together, and, and elect members.
Well, it would be nice if they could do it on both sides, but I don't think that the Palestinians want anything to do with the Israelis and their government. So, there's the rub.
Yeah.
The take I get on that part of the world is they still are very, very conscious of who are you, where'd you come from. I can remember when I was doing business in Turkey that I was meeting with the Turkish Air Force, and there was one of the guys in the office who was from Turkey, and he said, "Oh, who are you meeting with?" So he goes to the list. He says, "He's a Turk, he's an Arab, he's a Turk, he's an Arab." So it's very, very conscious in their mind of who you are, where you come from. And I think the beauty of this country is, for the most part, you're an American. And maybe you like pasta more than I do, and I like English pork pies, but that's about as close as we get to some sort of identity. So.
Not so today.
I found that when I
changed.
served in Bosnia too. I mean, they would say, you're a Serb or you're a Croat, So there's a lot of places around the world where that sort of ethnic identity is probably more important than your country itself.
Yeah. But I think these are the things that bother me today, because we have people being separated by who they are. I'm an African American. Well, most African Americans have never seen Africa. Why can't you just say, drop the African, you're an American, or I'm an Indian American, or you're an Irish American. So people have started to do that in the last few years. Never used to do that before. And that's what separates. That means a big division between people, and I don't think it helps anything at all. And I'm frankly quite tired about it. I wish that, and it's in the press, it's in the papers all the time. I don't look at people that way.
Well, it's been going on in this country for a long time. I can remember growing up in Providence and lived in mostly an Irish neighborhood. And I'm only half Irish. The other half is English, which is probably the worst combination you can get. And it was noticeably different. And we had one Jewish boy in the neighborhood. He was quite different, and everybody picked on him, kind of thing. And we're getting away from it to some extent, but it's not something that, all of a sudden, back when the Pilgrims landed, everybody's all kumbaya kind of thing. And it's a continual problem that we just have to keep working on and get over it.
Yeah, there was the "No Irish Need Apply" signs. And
yeah.
It wasn't too long ago when we had different colored. I'm so sorry. We had bubbler for this folks.
Oh yeah.
For this folks. So I think the history, like in Israel, is just so deep rooted. It was called Palestine before it was called Israel. So there's just a lot of.
But I'm always amazed, and I used to work with some Israelis, and this one professor used to come over. He was at the Technion in Israel, and he used to come over and work with some of the scientists in our building. And I said to him one day, "Mogi, what do you do when you're being bombed?" And he said, "We learn to live with it, Gail." He said, "That's the way it is." He said, "The kids go and get their gas masks on."
Yeah.
And he had little ones. And he said, "I served in the Israeli army." I think he had to serve until he was in his 50s. And he said, it's just a way of life.
Yeah.
And he said, there's always tension. He said, we don't notice it as much, but when people from outside of Israel come, they get it immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to go to visit somebody at the Gaza Strip, which is a pretty hotly contested area, and he ended up coming to see us just because of so much issues, and he talked about that exact same thing, living there and why he lives there, but, knowing where the bomb shelters are, constantly under bombardment,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
has young kids, and, it's a difficult choice to make to live
Oh,
there,
yeah.
but he's committed to Israel, but I guess, I was deployed to Iraq, and I know what it's like to run to a bomb shelter, but I just can't imagine having to do that as part of your everyday
Well,
life.
and this
Yeah.
is your life, yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
that must be tough.
Yeah.
Must be a tough way to go.
Well, I think they end up with a situation, I think, that it becomes ingrained into them that when the whistle blows, everybody knows what
Yeah.
to do, and it's just part of your life. And at the same time, we're seeing the same thing going on in Syria. That war just never wants to quit, and everybody keeps stirring the pot, and now Turkey's getting into it. That whole section of the world, I think, is it's
I'm
just
not
difficult.
sure it'll
isn't it?
ever be resolved.
Yeah.
You know,
And
it's
I
just,
keep thinking back to
Yeah.
the story of Lawrence of Arabia, and his claim to fame was during World War I, he got all the Arabs together to fight the Turks, and then after the war was over, the Arabs went back to fighting each other again.
Yeah.
And it's an area where I think there's an awful lot of conflicts that
Yeah.
have not been resolved, and there's no easy way to resolve them that I can see.
Yeah,
I
and
want-
we had a chance to go to the Golan Heights, which is right on the Syrian
border, yeah,
and
yeah.
we were literally looking into Syria. We sort of heard these bombs going off in the distance, and it certainly kind of rattles you a little bit, knowing
Sure.
what's going on there.
It's almost like
That
living in
was-
Chicago.
yeah.
But that was a very interesting trip because we met with the UN peacekeepers. So in 1974, there was an agreement between Syria and the Israelis that they have to have a certain period, a certain distance of a couple miles where their troops can't cross this border.
Yeah.
So the UN peacekeepers are there to enforce that agreement. So they're not taking sides; they're just there to check it out. But so that was really interesting, and just to talk to them about their perspective of what's going on.
Where do they come from?
One was from the Netherlands, and another one was from Australia. So they come from all over.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And they
Do,
have
do
probably.
they carry weapons at all?
They do. They weren't carrying weapons where we were because this was on a old volcano that apparently doesn't erupt anymore. I hope because we were there.
At least not recently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they don't carry weapons there because a lot of tourists go up there.
Oh, okay.
To look at the Golan Heights and check it
Yeah.
out. And
Okay.
but there were patrols, and you could see the UN patrols in the area. Yeah.
I want to change the subject a little bit and get away from Israel if we can. I wanted to talk a little bit about these school shootings down in Florida and how, it's a horrible, horrible thing that happened. It always is. But immediately, it turns to gun control. Every time there's a shooting, it's always got to have gun control, got to go after those guns, got to get those guns away. And I keep thinking to myself, it's not really about the guns. It's about the people that are allowed to get the guns. We have all kinds of gun control laws, but they're not followed. And in this particular case, there were major screw-ups between the FBI, between the sheriffs down in Broward County, between the deputies, and we have 17 people dead. What do you think would be the first step in trying to alleviate or at least make them schools so that they're not gun-free places where shooters can go, get in rather easily, and start shooting because there's nobody there to stop them?
Well, I mean, I've talked to teachers, I've talked to administrators, I've talked to police, and I would say almost none of them agree that arming teachers is a good idea.
Well, I was listening to the radio was on my way in, and they were doing a poll, and teachers were calling in, and 85% of them said they would be willing to take training on how to use a gun and to bring it into the school so that they could protect not only themselves, but certainly the children.
Yeah, I mean, just the ones that I've talked to just think it's a horrible idea. I mean,
So what's the conclusion, though? What's the solution for it?
Well, you end up with something like they have on the airplanes. You got a
Marshals.
marshal flying on the plane,
Yep.
and he is not in uniform. You don't have any idea who he is. And the whole idea is to convince somebody that if you're going to get on board that plane and cause trouble, there's a guy there that you don't know which one he is.
Yep.
He's going to come and get you. And I think this is the situation that has to develop in the schools, that they have to get the confidence that it's not open season when you walk into a school. And right now, the concern is, you really don't want to have teachers walking around with guns. Well, it's got to be concealed carry. And it's got to be concealed carry such that nobody knows who's got it.
Right.
Because if you identify them, it's like putting the target on their back. And it just, unfortunately, what it's going to do, I think, is push the problem someplace else. And we saw this thing in Las Vegas, that you get a bunch of people together, some feathered nut decides, hey, I can go out in a blaze of glory or infamy or something. And I think there's a lot of issues involved in this.
Well, the mental health issue is a big one. I mean, this kid down in Florida, there were all kinds of red flags about what he was thinking, what he was doing. Some of the teachers knew. Certainly the authorities in that county knew, the FBI knew, and yet nobody did anything to stop this kid.
Well, that's the problem. They've got laws in place to do something about somebody who is a threat. You can involuntarily commit them for observation. And we see it in the paper all the time. Somebody gets involved in a domestic violence event. Next thing you know, you see it in the paper, they send them down to Bridgewater for observation.
Right.
So they start to get into the point of, we're going to do something about this. And I understand the other half of the problem is, if I call up and say, hey, Jerry Paracella's got a screw loose, does that mean they have to go pick you up and take you away? So I think it gets to be an issue that, how do you get valid information that you can operate on, as opposed to, I want to get that SOB because he did something to me, I'll just drop a dime on him. Nobody knows what drop a dime means anymore. But
Yeah, but in this particular case, there were no questions. This kid
it was the
definitely
same with
a
just
problem.
about every one of them. If you go back with 20/20 hindsight, you can find out that, gee, they was doing something weird. Like the guy in Las Vegas, he had an awful lot of guns, and he had an awful lot of ammunition, and he hardly ever went shooting. How?
Yeah, but when you start
A
thinking,
reasonable restriction we have in Massachusetts is a 10-round magazine capacity, is because you know, I mean, carrying around these 30-round, 50-round, 100-round clips, you know, what's the legitimate purpose for that?
Yeah.
So in Massachusetts, we have a limit of 10 rounds per magazine.
yeah, Massachusetts has some pretty strict
Yeah.
laws,
Yeah.
and it's not easy to get a permit to carry.
No.
I don't know how easy it is in Florida, but they have laws too. And apparently, one story I heard, I don't know how valid this is, he went in to get some kind of a gun, and when he was asked to fill out the paperwork, he left.
Yeah.
So he shouldn't have had the guns, but apparently he told a number of people that that was his wish. He wanted to shoot up a school.
He legitimately bought
know.
guns because the system for rapid checking didn't work.
Right.
And I think this is another one of these issues. We've got laws on the books. They just aren't being enforced to the vigor that they should be.
And we don't need more.
No, and I know you're saying that yeah, we got a 10-round magazine limit. My days in the with the big kids at camp routine, go back a ways to the M1, and it's an 8-round clip. I could change those things in nothing flat. It didn't make a difference at all. So the size of the clip makes somebody happy, but that's not going to fix the problem. And I think...
Well, they're going after the AR-15. I was talking to my husband about it, and he said, you know, there are handguns that you can buy that can shoot as much as an AR-15. There's semi-automatics. And he says you can shoot off with a handgun almost as fast as you
just
can with
about
one of
every gun you
those.
buy today is a semi-automatic.
Semi-automatic, yeah.
There's a few people selling revolvers, but that's it. And we talked about it Monday at the senior center. I can remember, this is 30, 40 years ago when I was playing hockey with the big kids. And there was 2 cops on our team. One was a PBD cop, and the other one was MDC. And they were continually complaining that they were outgunned when they got into a free-for-all because somebody was bringing in MAC-10s. You can't legally own a MAC-10, but the bad guys had them.
They
and
always do.
That's an automatic pistol, machine pistol, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to our friend, the
Well, let me just give you a heads up. We have about 2.5 minutes.
So I got one last question. What would it take to get an Israeli firm to move to Beverly? That little report you sent me, I noticed there are little circles at the bottom and what kind of thing. IT and medical technology. We've got cell signaling on our border. We used to have New England Biolabs here. Cell signaling has taken over their building. So those are 2 areas that I think would fit within Beverly. What would it take to get one of those Israeli companies here?
Well, there's a group called Mass Challenge, which has an office in Jerusalem, and so that's the Massachusetts-based entity that their job is to try to bring businesses from Israel to Massachusetts. And I'm going to meet with some of those folks in the near future, so that's definitely something I'm going to talk to them about. And I did talk to some folks while I was in Israel saying, hey, here's some of the things we got going on the North Shore. You know, it's very expensive to rent in Cambridge and in Boston. You know, come up here on the North Shore. We've got these resources. We've got these entities here. So that's something that, you know, I'm definitely trying to work on to try to make those connections. Like I said, North Shore Adventures at the Cummings Center.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's something that we're working on.
Very good. So we hope you're successful
Thank you.
in that venture, and we'll have you on again in the future, and hopefully that things will have progressed somewhat. I want to thank you for coming, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time. Good night.